This video is about the LeiaPlayer, and similar to the LeiaCam video that I have produced, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in this video as to the file formats that are supported with LeiaPlayer, how you import those files and play them within the player, and also how you transform from 2D to 3D and into the Leia image format. So this video is not so much focused on the front end, it's again focused more on the back end, the files that are generated and used by the LeiaPlayer. So I hope that you find it useful. Again, this stems from the LeiaLoft forum where there have been questions around that, and I thought it might be useful just for you to have some of the insights that I've gained as I had a look at the Lume pad and how the LeiaPlayer operates. LeiaPlayer. The LeiaPlayer is obviously quite a key application for us to have a look at because it's the means for us to view the content on the light field display. So there's three different modes of looking at content through the LeiaPlayer. There is the 2D content, which is basically just having a look at an image or a video just like on any other device, not utilizing any of the stereoscopic or light field technology. Then there is the ST mode. ST stands for stereoscopic mode. That's for viewing content obviously stereoscopically, just for the left eye and the right eye. So it just has two views. It doesn't have the four views that ultimately we are interested in, but it has the two views for us to be able to look at things stereoscopically. For that, the minimum requirement is that we have two images. If we only have one, then you can't view that stereoscopically. You need to have an image obviously for your left eye, and you need to have another one for your right eye. And then there is the 4-view mode, and if we want to view things in the 4-view mode, we need to render 4 views. Anything less, we will not be able to view things in 4V. So knowing this now, let's have a look at the different formats and what they generate and how they are handled by the LeiaPlayer. So first we're going to have a look at images, and then we'll have a look at video file formats as well. So for image file formats, we're going to start off with just the standard JPEG image. By the way, it can be PNG images as well. I think there's various different file formats that the Lume pad accepts. I don't know the full range of that, but I do know that PNG and JPEG are image formats that can be taken. But here we are looking at just the standard 2D flat file, just like any other device, and the handling of that. So for a standard image, you will obviously only be able to view that in 2D, in the 2D mode. You won't be able to view that stereoscopically or in the 4-view mode. However, having said that, the LeiaPlayer does come with a converter. So you can convert your 2D images to 3D, and that will generate a new file type, the Leia image file type. And there's two types, and I've distinguished them by naming them type 1 or type 2 here for purposes of this presentation. And it generates a Leia image file that contains the base image as well as a depth map. And with that, you will be able to also view that in the 4-view mode. We'll be looking at those image types a little bit later when we get to them. But just so that you are aware, you can convert your 2D images to 3D. Okay, next we'll have a look at the side-by-side file format. And worth noting here is that if you do provide the LumePad with side-by-side files, you need to suffix them. So you basically need to have a suffix 2 times 1 dot whatever file format it is, in this case here JPEG, and then the LumePad is aware that that is a side-by-side image. If the image is half size in the horizontal direction, and that's a common format as well, where you have side-by-side, but the side-by-side is half the width to the original image, you have to also suffix that with the word half. So you say half underscore 2 times 1 dot whatever the image format is, in this case here again JPEG. And the LumePad will know how to interpret that. So as long as you are consistent with the suffixing of your files, it will be able to transform those files into the right mode. So with that, you will have two images. With two images, you can create your stereoscopic view, and obviously because you have two images, you can just pick one of those and it picks the first one to then generate your 2D view as well, should you choose to look at it in 2D. But it cannot generate the 4-view mode from that. Although, having said that, it does generate them on the fly for you. So not from the native file, but the LeiaPlayer application generates on the fly, I presume, a depth map, and from that then generates the 2 additional views required in order for you to be able to view that in 4V. So although, like I said, not natively inside your side-by-side file, the LeiaPlayer does that for you on the spot. Also, if you edit the file, and you do have the ability to edit this type of file, you will store it as a LIF type 2 file, so a Leia image format, and this is the second type of file. And the second type of file is similar to the first type, but in addition to just having one image and one depth map, it has 2 images and 2 depth maps. So you actually have retained in that file your 2 images. It contains 4 images, but only one of those is visible if you were to look at that with a standard application. Again, we'll have a look at that when we get to that. Okay, so the next type of file that you can transfer to the LumePad. This is not a format that your camera generates, but it is something that you can generate externally and then bring into the LumePad and have a look at. You can generate the 4 views and stitch them together like this. You have to suffix that file with a 2 times 2 dot whatever file format it is, in this case again JPEG. And obviously if you feed it 4 images, it will have 4 images to use, and you can then view that in 4V mode. Of note here is that it does not give you the option of looking at that in the ST, in the stereoscopic mode, although I believe it would be possible. It really doesn't make sense. If you have specified your 4 views, you're only taking away from that by looking at it stereoscopically. So in that sense, I can understand why the ST mode would not be made available. Okay, the next format that we're looking at is this Leia image format type 1 that we've been talking about. And the way to generate that type of file is by doing a 2D to 3D conversion. And once you've converted it, that file type then allows you to generate all 4 views. So it has the 2D view, obviously, because you have one image, and it allows you to generate the 4 views using the depth map. Of note here again is that it does not give you the option of looking at that in the ST mode, in the stereoscopic mode. And the reason for that is because natively in the file format, you don't actually have a second image. You still only have that one original image and a depth map. And with that, you basically generate your 4 views, but you don't inherently have a stereoscopic left eye, right eye view in that file. Okay, and lastly, the Leia image format that contains the left and right eye view as well as depth maps. And if you have all of that available to you, then you can look at it stereoscopically because you have the left and the right eye. You can obviously also look at it in 2D, but with the depth maps, you can also generate your 4-view mode. So with that, you get all 3 options. So those are the different formats and how they're handled from an image perspective. Let us now move across and have a look at what we have from a video file perspective. So the different formats that LeiaPlayer accepts that I'm aware of is again a standard video. That is just a flat 2D video, just like it is generated with the front camera of your Leia camera app. With that, you can only view that in 2D. You do, however, have the option of generating a 4-view format by using LightField Studio. And we'll cover that when we get to our LightField Studio application. Then you also have your side-by-side video, which is what the rear camera produces. Again, you have to suffix those files with the 2x1 for the case of full width side-by-side, and with half _ 2x1 if it's the half width size of your side-by-side. So with those suffixes, the LeiaPlayer will interpret those files appropriately in order to know that that is stereoscopic content, and can then generate your stereoscopic views from that. Now, having said that, again, similar to the image format, it can generate on the fly your 2 other views in order to have your full 4-view viewing mode available to you. So that is the LeiaPlayer doing this on the fly in order for you to be able to view the content in 4-view. And you do have the ability of changing the format so that it is natively 4-view as well, using the LightField Studio. So if you feed that format into the LightField Studio, you can generate a file, a 4V file, that can then also be read by the LeiaPlayer. And lastly, we actually have the 4-view file. In order for the LeiaPlayer to interpret that correctly, you have to suffix the file with a 2x2.mpg, and it then knows that it is a 4-view file. And similar to your images, with 4 views, you have everything available to you in order to generate 4 views. Now, again, similar to your images, with 4 views available to you, why would you want to go back to stereoscopic viewing? You're basically taking something away. That doesn't really make sense. So the stereoscopic viewing mode is not available to you, although I think the capability would be there to have that with the information that is available, but it doesn't really make sense if you've got something greater, a 4-view file available with all of its views. Okay, so that covers all of the different file formats for the LeiaPlayer. Let's now go and actually have a look at the LeiaPlayer and see what it looks like. Okay, let's open up the LeiaPlayer. So here we are in gallery view. You can go to other folders as well including all of your internal folders on the device. But for our purposes now, we're just going to stay in gallery view, and we'll open up one of the images that we've taken today. And you can see the 4 modes. Currently it's in 4V and 4 view, which won't look good on this screen capture for you, because you obviously don't see it in 3D. You will see it all in stripes. But for me, it is perceived in full 3D from various angles. I can now set that to stereoscopic as well, which just gives me the 2 views, and of course 2D, which will look the best for you, but the worst for me. So the one thing that I do want to show you here is how you edit those from in here. So there is the edit button. Let's go in here, and you can see various icons, and I'll just quickly go through them. That cube that you see at the beginning, that is to change your 3D settings. They're the ones that we're really interested in. So here you can change your depth. That is your perception of depth in the image, from really strong to virtually nothing, right? And we'll have that somewhere in the middle. You can also change your focus. Now, focus is not what is traditionally meant by focus, like the focus on a camera. This is more the focus from a 3D perspective. Where is the image relative to your screen? So you can change the focus to being in front of the screen, or to taking it to the back of the screen, or having it at the screen. So I'm just going to have it at the screen. This way, at the moment, the way I'm perceiving it, half of this plant is protruding out in front of the screen, and half of it is going towards the back of the screen. The other thing that you can set here is your bokeh, and your bokeh is the ability to change some blur in the background, and that actually looks quite nice if you want to bring focus to your main object. There are other settings here as well, so we'll just get out of this. For now, I'm not going to save it. You do have your standard settings that you get with editing applications. I'm not going to go through these in detail, because the focus here for us is the 3D side of things. But you can change your brightness, your contrast, saturation, etc. You can also crop your image and rotate it. You can change the filters to something else, and you can also change the lighting retrospectively, right? So, for example, you can have a spotlight from the side here. Okay. The one thing that I do want to note here is that some of these settings are lossy and others are not lossy. So if you make a change here in the 3D settings, your depth, your focus, your bokeh, those settings can be reversed, right? So they are not lossy settings. So if I were to scale down the depth, for example, to nothing, and just essentially make that a 2D image, and if I were to save that, in fact, I'll do that, right? I'll save that. And it now asks me whether I want to override that or save it as a copy. I would recommend that you always save it as a copy. You do want to retain it, even if some changes are not lossy. And if I now go back into that image to edit it and go into those settings, I've scaled down the depth to nothing, but I can regain that depth by scaling that up now, right? So that is not lost. That is still information that is retained in that image. The same thing applies to focus, and the same thing applies to bokeh. If, however, I go into these image settings here, and I were, for example, to, in saturation, scale down the saturation so that it's black and white, and I save that, okay, let's save that. I'm going to override the copy that I've got. And if I were now to go into these settings again and we'll try to get the saturation back, I can't. It's gone, right? The image has been saved with that loss of information, and you can't get that back. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not something bad. It's basically the standard functionality of editing. You are overriding your changes and you're committing them as new changes to your file. But just be aware of that some of those settings are lossy and others are not. Okay, let's just go back to our gallery view. And there's a few other things I want to show you here as well. Let's just go down to this image here. And this image happens to be a 2D image. So we can only view it here in our 2D mode. But it does allow us to do a 2D to 3D conversion, as we've discussed before when we had a look at our slides. To do that, all you do is press that button and it will go away and do a conversion for you. And now, lo and behold, you can see it in 2D and you can select 4V. So you can see it in your 4-view mode. Now what that's done, of course, is create a new file for you, a Leia image file, as we've discussed. And now that you've got that, you can edit it just the way that we could edit the other image as well. So you've got the same editing icons there as we already saw. Okay, and there is one more thing that I want to show you as well, and that's to do with videos. So let me see if I can open up a video. So this is a video again of that plant. Let me just pause that. And we can view that video because it was taken as side by side in 4V, in ST, and in 2D. Now, if you are in 4V, and this only works when you're in 4V on a video, you can change the depth of that video, similar to what you could do when you edited an image. And the way to do that is to select these layers here, these depth layers. And when you do that, you can see these two bubbles appear, the plus 3D, minus 3D. And you can do this anywhere on the screen. You just touch the screen, and if you move upwards, it will increase your depth. And if you move downwards, it will decrease your depth. So now it's essentially just a 2D video. And this is sort of a medium balance of depth. And this is very strong depth. And you can do that, and your whole video will change to that depth level. So let's just play that video. And you can see, well, you can't see it, but I can see it, that it has changed that depth level. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to show you was how you share your content. So let us open up our image again. Lucky I didn't override this one, so we've still got it in color. And you can firstly just see the information of that image. So you can do that on any image. It'll show you the name, the date, the size, and what format it is. You can then also share that image on LeiaPix. So let's just do that. We'll call that spiky leaf plant. Okay, and let's post that. And that's posted it onto LeiaPix. Okay, since I've made some of the footage in this video, another release of the LeiaPlayer has come out. And I just want to quickly point out some features of that. Okay, so for one, MPO files are now supported. And I've mentioned MPO files previously in another video about the Fujifilm 3D camera. And it was a camera from a long time ago, but that's the camera that Fujifilm has developed that introduce the MPO format to the world. And I've got the link to that video up above if you want to have a look at that. But it's a welcome format for the Lume pad to support. It is a format that I welcome because I've got a lot of footage that I've taken with that format already. And I'm sure there's others of you out there that welcome that as well. The second thing I want to talk about is automatic detection of the file format, the suffix that you usually give a file when you put it onto the Lume pad to detect whether it's side by side or quad or half width or full width. Now there's auto detection around that, and you can also manually set that. Let me just quickly demonstrate that. So here we are looking at an image that was detected as 2D, and hence we see the option of doing a 3D conversion here. However, what we want to do is for this to be viewed stereoscopically, since it's a side-by-side image. So for that, we'll go to the three dots and add a 3D tag. We indicate that this is side by side, it's full width, and there you go. Now we see the image in 4V mode. And of course, we can switch that to stereoscopic and to 2D also. Now let's have a look at a quad image. And we see that it has auto-detected this as a side by side, but we actually want this to be quad. So again, we go to our three dots and correct that. Let's select 3D and quad, and now we see the image correctly in 4V. Lastly, I just want to talk about some stereoscopic viewing accuracy improvements that have been made. And in particular, I've noticed when you go into the editor and you use the slider to adjust your depth, that previously there was just smooth transition all the way up and down that scale. Now there seems to be a discontinuity when you get to a certain point where all of your image shifts to the right as you move up. And let me just demonstrate that to you, what that looks like. And you can see here that as I slide the slider up, yep, there you go, there's the discontinuity. And I'm just going to go back down and up again. You can see how the image shifts back and forwards at that point. And I was intrigued as to why that is. I was wondering whether that was just a glitch or whether that was actually intentional. And I'm now convinced that this is intentional. Let me just explain to you why I think that. I can't say this for certain, but this is what I think is happening. And it's all about depth. Depth perception depends on your camera separation, your physical camera separation. For the Lume pad, that's fixed, but if you have external cameras, you can have different camera separations. And a greater separation means greater depth, and less separation means less depth. That, in the end, determines how much depth you have in your image. Once the image has been taken, that depth is essentially fixed. You can't change that anymore unless you retake your photo. However, we know that in LeiaPlayer you have a slider that allows you to change the depth. So how is that done? How can that take place? And the way that is done is through software. So we have an algorithm that uses depth maps to simulate different distances based on your original images. And it generates 4 views for you. As we know, the Lume pad has 4 views, and it then simulates, based on those depth maps and your original images, different camera distances. And then you can use your slider to do that. However, as we know, with any software, when you simulate something, that introduces errors. And it is like that with depth as well. So the further you depart from the original image to your simulated image, the greater that error is. So if it's small, if it's a small distance, then you're going to have a small error, which is desirable. However, if you depart from that further, then you have a larger error, and that will cause visual distortion to happen more so than if you're close to your original image. And we try to avoid that. Now, ideally, of course, we would like to have the left eye image or the right eye image, the actual original image taken as our view. And that's actually what takes place in the LeiaPlayer when we have zero depth. So if we take our slider to 0, it actually takes our left eye image as it is, unmodified. However, that's not really what we're interested in. We're interested in some depth in order to generate some 3D vision. And to do that, we slide our slider up and we start to simulate some of those views. So at small depth levels, there's going to be a little error just by using the left eye image. And if we were to, say, introduce the right eye image, we would actually introduce more error into those views because the right eye image is still further away than all of those generated views. So what we end up doing is we only use the left eye image. We don't use the right eye image. However, as we start to increase the separation of our simulated views, the right eye image becomes more significant. We get closer to the right eye image with at least some of our simulated views. And in that case, it now starts to make sense to start to use the right eye image. And that's actually what we start doing. We use both images to generate our views, still based on depth maps, but in this case we use both images. And what we do is we center our origin. We are no longer just interested in having things biased towards our left eye. We want to include the right eye and have equal distances to both. So we actually shift all of our views, the whole set of views, to the right in order to also include the right eye image. And as you've noticed, there is a shift when that takes place from being left eye centered to being centrally centered. And that is that visual discontinuity that you see when you slide that slider up. It takes place when the software starts to utilize the right eye image as well as the left eye image. It doesn't just base everything on the left eye. And it makes sense. So once that's done, you can continue to use the slider even further to increase your depth, and it uses both images for that. So what then shall we say about this discontinuity, this step that we have observed? And after this explanation, I'm sure you would agree with me that this is a step in the right direction. So this brings us to the end of yet another video. I hope you found it useful. Thank you for watching, and God bless.